Today we take a look at some of the craziest NBA trades that were offered but shockingly rejected when they probably shouldn't have been. These were some great offers, but for some reason these teams said no. Like first up, and one of the most recent is actually Mikhail Bridges. Of course we know he was included in the deal that sent Kevin Durant to the Suns, but before that he was on Phoenix, and it was said that the Memphis Grizzlies offered 4 first-round picks for him and the Suns said no. Then he was traded to the Brooklyn Nets, so the Grizzlies offered them 4 first-round picks and they also said no, which goes to show just how valuable the league thinks Mikhail Bridges is. He's a 17 point per game scorer who's never missed a game in his 4-year NBA career, plays excellent defense, and shoots 40% from 3. There's really not much more you can ask from a role player, and he would have fit perfectly into the Grizzlies system at small forward. From the Suns' point of view, I get why they wouldn't want to accept this offer. They want to compete and still win now, so of course they wouldn't have wanted 4 first-round picks. But from the Nets' perspective, well, now they're rebuilding, so I think they definitely should have considered taking this deal a little bit more seriously. Either way though, had it have gone down, it would have been a massive deal. And the Memphis Grizzlies really wanted to make something happen this season. They desperately wanted to make a move to change their team and get rid of their picks in exchange for a player, which makes perfect sense seeing the amount of young talent with potential they already have. Which is why they also made a run at getting Kevin Durant by offering every single pick and pick swap they currently own for him. And seeing that they currently have 8 first round and 9 second round picks, this deal would have been huge, and maybe one the Brooklyn Nets should have taken. But then again, I still do like the trade they eventually ended up getting. Besides, Memphis is going to be great for a long time to come, so their draft picks weren't as enticing as 2 young players who are great right now. But that's not all, because when that didn't go through, this team remained desperate to find a small forward that would fit in their system. And if it wasn't going to be Mikhail Bridges and it wasn't going to be Kevin Durant, they turned their attention to OG Anunoby, but apparently that wasn't even really the case, seeing that most of the teams came out and said the Raptors' asking price was astronomically high for OG. And that was proven by the fact that at this deadline, the Indiana Pacers offered 3 first-round picks for him. This is a deal that makes sense. I would have loved it going both ways. He would have fit right in Indiana, whose team is already very offensive heavy and still needs that go-to defender, but the Raptors said no. Then the Grizzlies also offered 3 firsts to Toronto and they still said no because they wanted 3 picks and a valuable young player. And at that point, both the Pacers and the Grizzlies immediately backed out of trade talks, which is starting to make it seem like Toronto just doesn't know how to make trades. Which reminds me of way back in 2019, which is our oldest trade of the video. And for this trade, I always heard it as the Thunder offered Russell Westbrook and Paul George, who were both considered in their primes at this point, for Pascal Siakam, and the Raptors straight up said no because they saw potential in Pascal. But it was actually Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, and 4 first-round picks that the Thunder wanted, which makes a lot more sense on why Toronto turned it down. But this one was still interesting because the only reason Kawhi Leonard chose the Clippers over the Lakers a few years ago was because they were able to trade for Paul George. So if the Raptors make this trade, what would that have meant for Kawhi? Would he have stayed in Toronto to play with him, or would he have joined LeBron and AD in LA so he could still play in his home state? It gives a lot to think about. But speaking of the Lakers and the Raptors, back in 2021, before the Westbrook trade happened, the Raptors offered Kyle Lowry to LA in exchange for Dennis Schroeder, KCP, 2 second-round picks, and Talen Horton-Tucker. But LA said no because this was back when they were high on Tucker and they wanted to keep him because they thought he was a valuable young player. Well, if they would have taken this deal, it would have saved them Montrezl Harrell and Kyle Kuzma because they wouldn't have made their deal for Russell Westbrook. Sure, Kyle Lowry's been nothing special since leaving Toronto, but to have had him and Kyle Kuzma still would have been a huge difference maker. But oh yeah, don't forget, the Lakers eventually ended up trading Horton-Tucker for Patrick Beverley. And this wasn't the only great deal they turned down for Talen, because they also turned down a first-round pick for him at one point, which doesn't sound all that great right now, but it's huge because LA turned down so many deals for so many different players because they didn't want to give up both of their first-round picks. So if they had just one more to give up, their roster could be looking completely different right now. The Miami Heat's roster could be looking extremely different right now too if they would have accepted the Rockets offer back in 2021. You see, at the start of the 2021 NBA season, the Rockets proposed a trade of James Harden for Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn, Precious Achiuwa, 2 first-round picks, and 4 pick swaps. And at the time, it seemed ridiculous that the Rockets would even ask for that much, seeing that Tyler Hero was a valuable young player where the sky was the limit, Duncan Robinson was a young sharpshooter, and Kendrick Nunn was in the middle of a young breakout season, while Precious Achiuwa was still a rookie. At the time, it seemed like way too much to give up for even James Harden, so the Heat said no. Well, look at how things have turned out. They traded Achiuwa in a deal for Kyle Lowry, who's averaging 12 points a game. Kendrick Nunn is strictly a bench player. Nobody wants Duncan Robinson, and Tyler Hero's looking more and more like he might have peaked early on, while the Heat continued to need more offense for their team. Listen, it's easy to look back now and say this, but this was a terrible missed opportunity for Miami. But on the flip side of things, the Philadelphia 76ers aren't completely off the hook. Of course, James Harden's been great for them, but before he was was traded to the team, Philly had a trade offer they should have never turned down. And it was to trade Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, and Matisse Thybulle to the Kings in exchange for Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, Harrison Barnes, and 2 first-round picks. But the 76ers said no, and only because they didn't want to trade Matisse Thybulle. Well, it's a year later and Halliburton has turned into one of the brightest young stars in the league as a 22-year-old team leader, averaging 20 and 10 on 40% from 3. Buddy Hield and his shooting would have fit right in, and Harrison Barnes would have played pretty similar to what Tobias Harris offers them every night, not even to mention the 2 first-round picks. Plus, it would have gotten them out of Tobias' contract. Don't get me wrong, this would have turned out to be another terrible move by the Kings, so they're the real winners that this deal didn't go down. And of course, I'd never say Philly are losers because they got Harden, but it just makes you think about what they could have had. And it's like they ended up trading Matisse this year anyways for Jalen McDaniels and 2 second-round picks. So was this deal really worth turning down after all? The New York Knicks found themselves in a similar situation where they could have traded for a star, but said no thanks to not wanting to trade a role player. And it's the Knicks, so of course this one's just terrible. Last year, the Utah Jazz proposed the trade of Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks for RJ Barrett, Quentin Grimes, and 3 first-round picks. Donovan Mitchell was hearing from his agent and the team that he was headed to play for his hometown team, and it was because of this trade. So he was ready to go to New York, but it was held up for one player, Quentin Grimes. The Knicks wanted to trade Emmanuel quickly instead and keep Grimes, so they pushed for that. But the Jazz wouldn't take it, so the Knicks moved on and Mitchell was traded to the Cavs instead. The Knicks really lost out on a franchise superstar because they didn't want to trade Quentin Grimes. So yeah, no pressure on him for the rest of his career. This dude was a rookie and the 25th overall pick. It's not even like he was a future potential superstar. So I'm sure he's going to turn out to be another solid Knicks role player. And then years down the line as his career progresses, this failed trade is just going to look worse and worse every day. Now changing gears, we started with the Brooklyn Nets, so let's circle back around to them. When KD first demanded his trade over the offseason, I couldn't believe all the offers the Nets were getting and saying no to. But the one that blew me away the most and still continues to blow me away is that the Celtics offered Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and a first-round pick for KD, and the Nets said no. Jaylen's a 26-year-old near superstar at this point, and the Nets somehow turned this one down. If they had accepted it, the Celtics would be crazy this year, and the Nets would have saved themselves a lot of trouble in the first half of the season. But it never went down, because instead they asked for Jaylen Brown, reigning Defensive Player of the Year Marcus Smart, the first-round pick, and a young player, which was never gonna and never should have happened. Brooklyn was crazy to believe they could have gotten anything close to that, but this more recent deal from them for Kyrie Irving was a little closer to actually going down, and it took place at the deadline when the Nets actually came to their senses. The Lakers offered Russell Westbrook and a first-round pick to Brooklyn for Kyrie Irving, and of course they said no because they wanted both first-rounders. But LA was only willing to offer it if Kyrie was willing to sign a 2-year extension right before the trade. But instead, Irving said no because he wanted a 4-year max deal in the offseason. So really this one was rejected thanks to Kyrie, but it makes sense. He's too unpredictable for the Lakers to trust his word that he wouldn't have just walked away as a free agent. Plus there were all those reports that the Nets owners purposefully went out of their way to not give Kyrie what he wanted in a trade. But had this have gone down, it would have been great for the Lakers and solid for the Nets. Personally, I'm all in for seeing the old Cavs duo reignite and try to run it back. But the older LeBron gets, the less likely it is to happen. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'm out.